views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not represent or reflect the official policy or position of the Take a Paycheck Foundation and podcast. All information shared is from personal experiences and does not constitute medical advice. We do not take responsibility for any statements expressed during the podcast. Take a Paycheck does not endorse any products or services. Any said products or services mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you or your condition. Please consult with your physician if you have medical questions, as it may pertain to your condition.
Hi everyone, welcome back to this week's episode on Take a Paycheck. I'm so excited to have Alex joining me today. Hi Alex, can you give me a brief introduction about yourself? Tell me a little bit about your education, your career, and what you've been up to recently.
Yeah, hey, thanks so much for having me. Great to be here. My name is Alex Levine. I'm a personal trainer. I live in Boston now. I'm born and raised in Boston, and I run a virtual personal training business for others with arthritis and other types of rheumatic diseases.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. So you're on this podcast because you're diagnosed with a rheumatic disease. What is your diagnosis and when were you diagnosed?
Yeah, so diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis and inflammatory arthritis. I was diagnosed about 8 years ago. We're talking 2015, 2016 was when I was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis.
And where were you at like that point of your life? Like school or work or like, I guess what stage of your life were you in when you got this news?
Yeah, so symptoms started years before, but when I was officially diagnosed, I was mid-20s. Kind of my career had just started a couple of years ago. I was kind of right in the career that I wanted to be. I was in health and fitness. I was working in youth sports, and that's feeling pretty good before everything kind of hit me at once. So everything hit me when I was kind of in this athletic field, and what hit me was a lot of arthritis and inflammation, and it kind of completely turned my life upside down.
How did you get to seeing a healthcare professional?
Yeah, so my story, like many others with ankylosing spondylitis, the time it takes to get diagnosed is usually a long time. I think now we're talking generally 8-9 years is the average of getting officially diagnosed. And the problem with that is the earlier we know we have this, it's best to treat ankylosing spondylitis as soon as possible, especially if you're looking at medication, but the exercise, the movement, the inflammation stuff, we want to see what we can, we want to take care of that as soon as possible. So that time period can really make things challenging to get out of that, to really start treating it. You're kind of already in the hole a little bit. And, that's a lot about what my program is about with fitness. But, I finally got to a diagnosis actually out of luck. So for years, I was searching for an answer based on arthritis symptoms in my early 20s, sciatica, low back pain, tightness that came out of nowhere. So for years, I was actually searching for an answer, but it was generally people just thought I was overdoing it at work or in sports. So my answer finally came when I actually injured my hip playing soccer, and I got an x-ray that showed kind of damage in my SI joints, the low back region, and that goes with ankylosing spondylitis. So that kind of led towards that diagnosis finally. But it was kind of out of luck, out of years of searching.
I think it also is tricky, right? Because your whole career is sort of like being active and like playing sports and all that. So you're bound to be injured or something might happen most likely. How did you really differentiate? I know you mentioned now you had like imaging done, but it was probably hard to like differentiate what was an injury or like just because of the sport rather than like damage in your hip leading to arthritis.
Absolutely. Some of it in the beginning, I thought this must be sports related. I do exercise a lot. I played basketball and soccer a lot. But then when I started getting the sciatica my first signs of sciatica were like 22 years old. And for anyone that's had that, and the sciatica was coming from the damage in the SI joint. So it was a little different, and it caused me to limp. I was limping around a lot, excruciating pain, like times where I had to call out of work. So that's when I kind of realized, all right, this seems like more than kind of aches and pains. At this age, I've never seen many people limp around at this age, especially those who are so active. I felt pretty good. So that was the warning sign.
And did you have any like family history with ankylosing spondylitis, or like were you the first one?
Yeah, great question. I actually learned that I did when I was diagnosed, but before that, I had no clue that anyone else did. Actually, My great grandfather had pretty severe ankylosing spondylitis, and that was back in a time where it was called something different and not many people had it, but we actually found his medical records, which he was in the hospital for the same. It was like really looking at myself, the same stuff, hip problems, sciatica. So we realized that everyone on that side of the family had the gene that goes with ankylosing spondylitis. That's the HLA-B27 gene, which a lot of folks with AS have that. So we did see the family connection after having no clue before that.
How did you learn about this condition?
Yeah, the first time, when I got the imaging done on my hip, it said bilateral sacroiliitis, which is SI joint inflammation, and it said SI joint damage. And it didn't say ankylosing spondylitis yet, but it said patient needs to be looked at for ankylosing spondylitis because this doesn't make sense why you would have this at such a young age, this damage in the spine already. So when the next doctor then said he definitely has ankylosing spondylitis, they tested the gene. And when I read that, I had never heard of ankylosing spondylitis. That word has never crossed paths with me, even being in personal training. So I was already a personal trainer, which is interesting because you probably should know and have some background in different rheumatic diseases. You do, but not ankylosing spondylitis isn't on there. I hope it is now. But when I got my education in personal training, AS wasn't on there. So first time I heard it, I had no clue what it was. And unfortunately, I looked online immediately and saw, unfortunately, the worst case scenarios with AS is what you look at if you Google it. And that's the first thing your mind goes to.
And so when you did Google it and you did see those things, how did that impact, I guess, your mental health or your well-being in general, or assumptions you may have made? Because a lot of the time, patients like us Google things and then we make big statements, I guess, or assumptions just based on what we see, because that's the only information we have.
Yeah, it's challenging. And the place I was in then was a pretty dark place already because I was limping around. I would feel pretty good, and then all of a sudden I'd be limping for a week or two, and the tightness was starting to creep in a little bit. And that's what happens with AS. The body really wants to cave forward because you're just dealing with so much inflammation, the SI joint stuff, but also other areas of the body can be affected. So already I was starting to really feel just tension. The whole body was feeling tense and it was hard to loosen up. So reading that stuff at that time was challenging for me to see where I was going to go from there. And I had no clue kind of where to get started.
Because you were also trying to, I guess, learn more about your condition. Did your rheumatologist or any specialist that you did see help you learn more about what it was?
Yeah, I saw a few different specialists at first, and they definitely helped me. They definitely, unfortunately, I was told a few different things, which made it a little confusing. One doctor actually told me, and I talk about this a lot on my social media channels, one doctor actually told me I should not work in health and fitness. It would be like not many people work in health and fitness with this. It'll be too much on you. You need more rest and low impact exercise. And then another doctor actually told me this might be the best career for you if you do it the right way. So the multiple opinions was challenging for me. And I think that's one of the hard things about rheumatic diseases and ankylosing spondylitis. A lot of us are seeing multiple opinions and it's taking a while to get diagnosed. So I was kind of told a bunch of different things. Everyone, I obviously, I think everyone meant well, but for me, not knowing anything about ankylosing spondylitis, I had no clue where to go from there.
Yeah.
And I tried to take bits and pieces from everyone and try to piece it together, but it didn't start out too well with my journey.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely hard. I feel like even for me, I went for a couple opinions when I was diagnosed just because of the medications. And like I wasn't sure like which one I wanted to be on. And then after you see other doctors, I feel like you're still even more confused because now you've gotten like too many different opinions.
Yeah. It was more kind of me figuring out some stuff on my own, which took some time, and me reaching out to different communities online and kind of piecing together, all right, maybe I can try physical therapy and try some nutritional stuff and think about the medication with the doctors. But I tried to piece it together and kind of take everything that was told to me and just start to make the best decision so I could at least get started on some sort of approach.
Yeah, for sure. But what was your medication journey looking like, I guess, from when you were diagnosed to now, and how have your symptoms changed, either better or worse?
Yeah, so symptoms started. I'm 35 now, and I was talking. Symptoms started about 22, so 13 years ago. It's been at 22. At 22, and when I was diagnosed about 25, 26, I had no clue I would be where I am at today. I couldn't envision, honestly, getting better. I couldn't envision like at least feeling good at this age. So that's a good start, I think. But my medication early on, I tried a lot of different things. I tried different NSAIDs and some different, unfortunately, I was given some painkillers with the NSAIDs, with some different medications when I was dealing with flares, and it was all a little too much. So I tried different medications for a year or 2 years, and I actually felt worse, just the route I was going down. So I actually went off medication and tried really everything I could away from medication just to kind of take a break from continuously going to the doctor. I was in a stage where I was repeatedly going to the doctor, trying different things, and nothing was really working. So I actually went off medication 2 years in, and I haven't been on medication since. So I have kind of a unique story. Most folks with ankylosing spondylitis take medication. Most of my clients are on medication in personal training. So I have kind of a unique story where I've tried to just make the best decision for how I felt, what the doctors were thinking, and just all the advice. I've tried to make the best decision possible.
So I guess the doctor that you go to, like, were they okay with this decision?
I saw multiple opinions on this. Some said, you're doing great, keep what you're doing. Others said, you have to take medication to stop the progressiveness of ankylosing spondylitis. So in the truth is, there's different opinions there. But, when one doctor said to me, you're doing great, keep revisiting it. If you're doing well now, keep revisiting how you're feeling. If you are feeling worse, if anything looks worse, you can revisit medication. But I definitely got the go ahead from one of the doctors, and I was feeling good, so I went down that journey.
And so what do you do now for like pain management strategies aside from like working out? And I guess, yeah, there's so many other services, or like you can go to physio, OC, like I don't know, change your diet. Like what are the pain management strategies that you use?
Yeah, everything. So for me, it definitely starts with the movement, and exercise has been key for me, just to consistently do it, because there's been times where I haven't been able to be as consistent, and I've definitely felt like, wow, this is I'm pretty tight as is, but without doing the movement, I feel horrible. And you can kind of see with AS, if you take time off, it's harder to get back started. So I've tried to consistently move, and that's a large part of kind of what my approach and foundation is, trying to put together consistency with working out and a program that makes sense. So the exercise is crucial for me. The nutrition has been crucial for me since day one. So when I was trying out different medications, I completely changed my diet, and I was actually able to get my inflammatory markers down off of the diet change. And, at the time I was dealing with a lot of gut issues, and there's a lot of overlap with the stomach issues, help with ankylosing spondylitis. So I kind of healed that up, and I got my inflammatory markers down from nutrition. So since then I was like, I need to keep up with this approach. So nutrition's been key for me. And I think the mental health stuff, the mindfulness, the meditation, I kind of use everything: the sauna, cold therapy, heat therapy, cold therapy, sauna. I do as much as I can. But I'm fortunate because of the career I'm in. I'm able to do that stuff a lot during the day. I don't have a regular 9 to 5. So that doctor that initially told me stay in this career, you'll have flexibility to move and to work on all these things, was completely right. I'm glad I listened to that.
I mean, now let's talk about your career, because I think that you're kind of like making your own schedule, I think, from what it sounds like, and you have that flexibility based on like what you want to do and how you're feeling and what time, how much time you have.
Yeah.
So why did you make that decision, I guess? And do you think that decision of doing this sort of career has really helped you like manage your condition?
Yeah. So pre-diagnosis, again, I was in sports already, but as the years went on, I started to get more invested in fitness for arthritis, fitness for joint pain, all the things I was struggling with. And I started to dive into different areas of fitness. And I became invested in figuring out the best movements for me, because my interest has always been movement. And when I was diagnosed, I went through a period of kind of giving up on it a little bit. But when I started to piece together, the best program for me and realize, all right, maybe I can tailor exercise a little differently for me. That's kind of what started my own approach with this. And that's when I started to think, I really want to help others who are struggling to get moving, struggling with exercise. And I wanted to find as many different routes of exercise to help people. So that's when I kind of looked across fitness at how can we individualize this for people who are really struggling, who are trying different classes, trying yoga, trying fitness classes, and nothing seems to work. It's actually making it worse. So I wanted to just bring a different approach to the equation with that.
Did you ever go to a physical therapist or an occupational therapist or anything like that for your ankylosing spondylitis?
Yes, a ton. Early on, especially when I was pre-diagnosis sciatica, I was in physical therapy a lot. The hip pain along with the sciatica. I had a shoulder injury that kind of went with AS, but not really. It was just part of this whole arthritic injury journey, but I went to physical therapy for that. So I was in physical therapy a lot over the years. And starting my own business, I've had a lot of good relationships with physical therapists who know about ankylosing spondylitis. I've tried to talk to as many people as I can about the best approaches and what they think, because again, everyone has different opinions. So over the years, I've had a lot of great relationships with physical therapists who have given me some really good insight on also how they've seen clients who've then worked with me also. So we've kind of shared notes and what we can do for the client long term.
So have you ever had any surgeries or anything for your ankylosing spondylitis? And if so, how did that go? If not, that's okay.
I have not had, I had a shoulder surgery around the same time I was diagnosed. It was separate, but I had some arthritic stuff going on, some tears in the shoulder, and that was about 8 years ago. And that was a big part of me trying to figure out how to work out with an injury and work out with reoccurring problems, because I've had problems with the shoulder ever since. So as a personal trainer, I've had it's been a different journey for me as a personal trainer. I talk a lot about the struggles I've had, but that's kind of made me, I think, more compassionate for folks who are really struggling. And it's made me look outside the box a little bit. And I've realized with AS, with spondylitis, you have to look outside the box when we're dealing with a lot of these different things, the pain along with the joint stiffness, along with maybe sciatica. So it can become very complex. So I think my journey gave me kind of a way to broaden my lens a little bit and learn as much as I could.
It's interesting that you mentioned sciatica, just because I also experienced sciatic pain all the way from my hip to my feet. Right when I was diagnosed with arthritis, because my arthritis impacts my fingers, my wrists, my ankles, and my feet. And I remember in grade 8 when I was diagnosed with juvenile idiopathic arthritis, my feet were so swollen and puffy, and it felt really heavy. And on top of that, I had sciatic nerve pain all the way from the back right under my foot, and it was terrible.
Yeah.
I didn't walk for a week, but I also changed my lifestyle in terms of what I eat, and I've been on medication stuff, even though I don't know if it's related to my arthritis.
Right.
My rheumatologist was always oh, it's separate and it's not related, but it's just so weird that it happened at the exact same time. Luckily, I've never experienced that ever since. It's been 7 years.
Wow.
But it's crazy because I also got that sciatic pain in the back.
Yeah, I think, the inflammation from these rheumatic disorders can cause a lot of havoc.
Yeah.
High inflammation markers. I know folks where their inflammation markers were the chart, mine, when I was first diagnosed, the range is here and I was up here. And I've heard of folks where their inflammation is just through the roof. So that, along with some changes in our bodies, our changes in our spines and the degeneration in the spine with AS can cause a lot of havoc that it can be challenging to figure out how to treat it.
And you've tried lots of things too, and like getting off of medication is like very hard. And I'm glad that you were talking to your doctor that time and made that decision with a physician. Because for me, like that's not the case. I've been on medication for 7 years with 3 years of not knowing what to be on and kind of just circling back onto multiple things. And then that's when I'm like, I need to change something or try some pain management or lifestyle changes because if I can't find medication, like what do I do? I had to make those decisions. I mean, I'm not the best at like being active and stuff, but definitely the food part, I've really restrained myself. And like my parents, or at least my mom, she also changed her diet based on what I was doing because I was so young.
Yeah.
She wanted to support me, which was very helpful, but it's hard to make those lifestyle changes when you're in university or college and you just want to socialize with people and like you can't eat that or it's going to cause a flare or like you can't exert your joints too much. So was this your first job or did you have other jobs prior to that that were different in the fitness space?
Always in fitness. I have my master's in sports leadership. My original thought was to work with youth sports. I was working at the Boys and Girls Clubs of Boston. I was in that career for a couple of years, and that's when I started experiencing symptoms when I was running different fitness classes for kids and running around all day. But I was always in fitness, but the change for me was I wanted to work one-on-one when I really started to struggle, and I wanted to work one-on-one. And I also, my social media content is more for the broader scope for that reason, because my main business is just one-on-one, because I saw how individualized this has to be and how for folks who want to put a program together, we really have to track it and carefully craft it. So that's where I went one-on-one, but originally I was thinking more group. I was thinking more running sports programs and fitness, but the change came when I really wanted to just honestly help as many people as I could through training. And I saw that more of a one-on-one thing, and I'm more of a one-on-one person. I like connecting with people and having long-term relationships. So that kind of fit me well. But fitness was always the goal. And that's where it was very tricky when I started experiencing these things I've never experienced, and my body was giving up on me. And, when your body's giving up on you like that, you lose hope a little bit. You lose motivation for sure. And especially when you're doing as much as you can. If you're doing as much as you can, medication, exercise, nutrition, and your body's still telling you, I'm in pain, it can be challenging to get out of that. So that's also one of the main things that, I try to work with people through, because I've been through that, and just giving them some good kind of background on what we can do to help that.
During your 20s and even now, like you are surrounded by friends and family members. So how did you tell them that you had arthritis?
Great question. Early on, I really didn't, since I was working in fitness and, I didn't really say anything because it was confusing. I would go from limping to playing basketball and looking pretty good. So I went through a bit of an identity crisis, and I actually didn't really tell many people for a few years. But when the limping got worse and pretty noticeable, it was hard to be like, when people would ask me, why are you limping? It was hard to hide it anymore. So eventually I started to tell people, no one really knows what ankylosing spondylitis is. So you would tell people I have arthritis in my hips, but it was always, I would never fully tell people, I know I have like a chronic disease that affects my whole body and might get worse as time goes on. But that was a bit of an identity crisis. And for years I told no one. And now it's my whole personality. Everyone I know, because of social media, everyone I know knows I have ankylosing spondylitis. I actually went to a wedding last year, saw people I hadn't seen since high school, and a lot of them follow me on social media, and they all know. So it brings a little bit of a different story when everyone knows versus maybe just the people closest to know. I don't think I thought about that when I went into a career working with what I struggle with, but that's okay, because I want to spread the awareness as much as possible.
So I'm wondering, because you said like identity crisis sort of thing, was it also like you maybe being in denial about this condition? What do you mean by identity? Can you elaborate a little bit?
Great question. Yeah, firstly, I was a little embarrassed because I looked like a 23, 24-year old who was an athlete. So it was a little embarrassing to say, I'm actually dealing with a condition. And also, it was embarrassing to limp around too. So sometimes I would try to hide that I was limping or hide that I was in pain because when you're young and struggling with that, it was just a little embarrassing. But also, yeah, it was a little embarrassing.
Yeah, so how did you grow from that?
First, I went through a period of real struggle and I decided I couldn't do that anymore. I was like, whatever I'm doing now has to be completely shifted. And I honestly looked to every health protocol possible, and my identity became trying to be as fit as possible. I was gonna have ankylosing spondylitis, but my thing was I didn't remission. I've never been in remission. I've struggled with AS for most days, but I was determined to be as healthy as possible with ankylosing spondylitis, and that's where I kind of went into supercharge and decided to just start doing as much as I could, but in a safe, joint friendly way, and in a way that I can consistently do it. But I honestly one day just couldn't live the life I was living. I was sitting at home a lot. I wasn't doing anything. Depression, anxiety. I was not the person that I wanted to be, especially being in the health and fitness field. So I decided I'm gonna do whatever I can. And I started to find methods that I'd never done. Walking became a big part of my life, using the sauna, cold therapy, yoga. I started trying honestly everything. And I realized, all right, maybe fitness is different than I thought it was. Maybe fitness isn't just about lifting weights and doing these traditional movements, which I love, bench press, squat, deadlift, love all those movements. But before AS, that's all I did. After AS, I started doing movement became different for me, and I started to look into all these different principles. So I became comfortable with being healthy, having this, but also striving to be healthy. And that's kind of when I determined, I don't care who knows I have it. And then they kind of didn't believe me because I got so healthy. And that was another phase. Someone at Pickup Basketball once told me, there's no way you have that. You're the fittest person here. You're in the best shape out of everyone. And that's kind of a compliment, but that's where it became, again, another identity crisis when you're feeling good with this. And maybe you're a little embarrassed of that too, right? When you're feeling good.
Yeah, it's hard. And now that you explain it, I feel like it's tricky because it's also invisible. I
Yeah.
know the limping probably wasn't invisible, but just in general, now that you're just working out and things, no one would know you have arthritis unless it's very severe arthritis, whereas you're using mobility aids and things like that. But for me,
Yeah.
I'm just walking around, no one would know. So it's picking and choosing who you're gonna tell, when you're gonna tell, why you're gonna tell them. But yeah, no, that's so interesting that you mentioned that it changed. And
Yeah.
now people are you look so good. Do you have arthritis?
No, now they second guess it. They, some people maybe think I'm lying. I mean,
Oh my.
with social media presence, I've gotten things over the years that, oh, you don't have this. There's no way you have this. So, lucky for me, I haven't dealt with too many postural stuff. A lot of folks really struggle posturally. I have a lot of clients who are really so stiff and tight in the upper body. And it's, unfortunately, when you look up AS, severe cases are very noticeable posturally. That was never me. I think I'm fortunate that way. I'm lucky that way. That affects everyone differently. So my thing was more the limping around, which is very noticeable. But other than that, like you said, you would not be able to know that anything's going on if I wasn't dealing with that. And that's where it became a really tricky disease, especially when you're running one day and the next day you're limping is another thing too. It's not like you were inactive for months. You were running, but then the next day you're really stiff and tight. And especially with AS, the morning tightness is a thing where a lot of us deal with. We wake up much stiffer and tighter. Some of my clients, their body at 7 a.m. compared to 3 p.m. is a completely different person. And if you didn't know they had AS, you would think they were making it up. if you didn't struggle with AS, but those of us that have AS, the morning tightness is like a serious thing where you're limping out of bed. You have to loosen up the joints differently. So it's an interesting condition that, and I think a lot of it, this brings a lot of challenges with self-confidence, motivation, embarrassment. A lot of this is a big part of it, and that definitely, as I've said, I've told you I went through all the whole emotional journey with this. So yeah, it's a big part of it.
And on top of that, I feel like you're right in a sense that it's a fluctuating condition. So people need to understand that although you're feeling great today, you might not feel great tomorrow or
Yeah.
even next week. And it's so hard to explain that to people, especially like first it's invisible, second you're changing up the way that you're feeling. Like there's just so many things that don't make sense, but it's like the reality of it. So how do you explain that to other people? It's a challenge for sure. You also have a newborn.
The reason that was brought up is because I was running around the newborn crying and my dog was barking and I was sweating and trying to find good lighting. So that's why you brought this up. So
No, and I think that it's a great topic to kind of talk about
yeah,
because I think now navigating a family and having a condition, constantly needing to take care of your newborn. Obviously, you have like a partner, a significant other, but how has that kind of either taken a toll on your body, but also like the good parts about it too? So, can you talk a little bit about your experience?
no, it's such a good question. And there's a lot of forums on being a new parent with spondylitis because, it's some tricky positions holding a baby, sitting with a baby a lot. Sitting for me has not helped over the years. Sitting is just like anytime I sit for a prolonged period, I struggle with low back pain. My hips get locked up. So it's definitely been an interesting position of just simple tasks that no one would think about can really be challenging with AS. And, you have to kind of take care of your health more than ever, but you want to spend time with your baby and you're going through a lack of sleep. So you might not be able to take care of your body as much, but that's definitely been a challenge navigating just some simple tasks around the house, just holding a baby and laying on the ground. And a lot of folks have struggle with these things, and that's what I try to help a lot of folks with, but definitely a different some different challenges. But the baby, nothing is better than having a baby, and the love goes far beyond the hip pain from sitting, so it's okay.
Yeah, but how do you accommodate yourself, or what are some solutions that well, there may not be solutions, but what are some things that you've taken more into consideration now with the newborn, now with like hip pain or pain in general, living with the condition? How does that work? Like, what are some new techniques or solutions or skills that you've learned to navigate this? I know it's like new for you too, but
No, for sure. Definitely being mindful of your position and what you're doing and how you're sitting, and are you still exercising, are you still moving, and how can you adapt the movement routine. It's hard to go into a newborn and do it. You can't do the same stuff you did before you had a baby. You have to adjust it a little bit. So I'm trying to find times to keep moving, exercising, even if it's these mini routines, which kind of became my specialty, these mini movement routines around the house, but taking time just to do that stuff because it can really make a huge difference. But also just being mindful of sometimes when a baby's crying, you're not thinking about your low back or your hips. But I'm trying to be mindful of the positions I'm in. And this is another thing where it's like, this wouldn't seem like a big deal. Sitting wouldn't seem like a big deal. But for me, it's like if I go on a 3-hour car ride, I'm like barely walking afterwards. I have to loosen up. So it brings about a different challenge of keeping with it and staying motivated during this time is important. I think kind of putting that all together and staying motivated is important.
I think you also get really excited. So it's like
Yeah,
hard to like think about it, right? Because you're like, oh my God, yeah, like I have this new baby, but you're so excited that you don't really think about the pain you might be in later on. Whereas
yeah,
like when you're sitting in a car, you're very much mindful of like, hey, I'm sitting in a car for 3 hours, I'm gonna be sore. But it's not that exciting to just sit in the car. So it's like a completely
yeah.
different situation.
Yeah, you're not really thinking about it. Yeah, you want to just be with your baby, but you know, again, there's a lot of forums, AS forums about parenting and the struggles people have from playing with their kids on the floor, lifting their kids up in the air. There's some serious struggles that can occur if the body is not feeling great in those positions. So, that's a real thing. And it's hard for people to have to go through that when they're having a family. That's all some folks really, that's all they want in life is a family and children and to be with their kids. And that's a challenging part that I definitely sympathize with people about.
You really talked about your career, but you've started your own virtual personal training business where you help people with ankylosing spondylitis. When and why did you decide to take this step? We sort of discussed it a little bit in the podcast episode, but I don't think like super directly.
Yeah. So, pre-AS, I was working in sports. I started to work in personal training in person for years. And when the pandemic hit, I went virtual. And that was kind of when I started thinking, I could never really find too many folks with ankylosing spondylitis around Boston. But when I went virtual into virtual personal training, I started to think, what if I could find people with ankylosing spondylitis around the globe, people with arthritis, joint pain. And that's when I started to really hustle, honestly. I was not really in that space because we were all working in person, and to put out a flyer, ankylosing spondylitis, a flyer in some Boston coffee shop saying anyone with ankylosing spondylitis, come meet here. There was a Boston support group through the Spondylitis Association of America, which is a great SAA I've done a lot of work with over the years. There was a Boston support group, but that only had 10 to 20 people. So when the pandemic hit and I went virtual, that's when I really started to think, let's try to find where the spondylitis people are so I can start working with them. And that honestly is when the social media started. I had no social media presence 3-4 years ago. I was working in person. That's when I started the YouTube channel and Instagram. And I had no clue that I would connect with so many people with AS. I did not know that many people with AS existed around the world. So that's kind of where it started, and it just ramped up from there. And that became my whole business, was working one-on-one with folks virtually. I completely left all my in-person jobs and transferred just everything online for that.
It's interesting that you bring that up because I felt the exact same way. Didn't know anyone, didn't know many people living with the condition. And then when you get on social media and you want to start like raising awareness or advocating for others, you basically get introduced into this like whole world of people that have this condition from everywhere.
Yeah.
And even today, like talking to you, like I would have never known that you existed. And I only know that because of social media. So it's just interesting how many people you can meet through social media. And it's just like you need to find the way to get there. I know some people have mentioned, if you type up certain hashtags, you can find certain content. But what tips do you have in terms of like navigating social media while living with a chronic illness if you're like initially diagnosed?
Yeah, and social media, pros and cons with everything. I think same with Google, same with looking up things. The only things I looked up ankylosing spondylitis early on were negative, because if you Google AS, everything's negative. There weren't positive channels about, no, we can do this, we can do this, we can feel better this way. Most of it was negative, and most of it was, you're just going to get worse, it's chronic. So I think it's crucial for folks, and I've found them, thousands of channels of folks who are having ankylosing spondylitis and they're trying to get healthier and they're trying to share their journey. Tons of channels out there. Unfortunately, AS isn't big enough where, we don't have that channel that's 1 million subscribers that's really spreading the word. One day, between us, we'll get there. But they're really, in terms of everyone, there's not a lot of us. But looking at the community, there's so many people around the world with this. There's great organizations in the UK, in Canada, in America. Organizations I'd never heard of, to be honest, until I started really digging online. So tons of organizations out there. But I would definitely say to be careful with social media and looking up the condition. I think obviously it's important to have education, but I think it's important to find some positive routes with this stuff and find others who are going through similar, like, find others who have gone through the same thing as you, and, find community that you can join. I think it's so important to put that together the best way possible that's not overwhelming and that's not going to be too much for you.
For sure. And I wondered, how is your training style maybe different from other personal trainers?
Yeah, I think everyone's different, but my training style I think is completely different from most personal trainers. I think because I have AS, because of the journey I've been on, I'm a lot more. How do I put this? I'm not going to knock other personal trainers, but I put a lot of care into each person. I put a lot of care into the program. It's not just about giving someone exercises. It's about the whole approach of doing this long term, being consistent with it, and doing the right stuff for the person. But also, the most important thing for me is, how is the person feeling? Is the person feeling good after the session? Is the person feeling better? Are we progressing things? Everything I've done has really been tailored towards how the person's feeling. And with that, I'm using science, I'm using the best techniques possible. But I think I put a lot of care into each person. And it's not just about giving exercises or knowing exercises. A lot of people know about exercise and movement, but they have a hard time connecting with the individual and listening to the individual. My whole thing is, I don't want someone never in pain during a workout or never too sore after a workout. Kind of the typical personal trainer is trying to, and I'm really generalizing here. There's incredible personal trainers out there. I'm really generalizing just because I think it's a serious issue in the space, is the personal trainers working the client like to exhaustion and to death. They're working them and they're like, want them to get a good workout. They want them to get their money's worth. And this is especially going on in person at high-end gyms, but that's the kind of the opposite of what I'm doing. I want people to work hard and, find strength and motivation, but we do so in a very unique, safe way that fits them where they're at that day. So I look at training a little differently than maybe the typical personal trainer, but that's not to knock other personal trainers.
For sure. And I wanted to end off the podcast episode with an advice segment. How would you advise youth and young adults already interested in fitness to change their mindset once being diagnosed?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's the thing we all struggle with. How do we've done stuff, for some people they were running or playing sports, and then they're really struggling and they can't do that anymore. So how do we go through that and adjust it so we can, be happy again and feel good again working out? And that was a struggle I had. I couldn't do the stuff I did before I was diagnosed. I can now, but it took a unique way to get there. So my whole thing has been small goals every day. Just have a different goal every day or every few weeks. We're starting with small goals, things that are attainable, so we can start to have the motivation to want to do it. First of all, for me, I was like so stiff and tight, and I was always in pain when I worked out. So I decided I'm only going to do things that feel good, and that just might be 5 minutes worth. That just might be resistance bands or modified stretches. And that's okay, because once I started to do that, I was like, oh, those feel pretty good. And that's how I ramped it up over time. So anything, it all matters. A couple minutes matters. One stretch matters. If you put it together that way, instead of looking at a full workout or something you used to do, put it together kind of in smaller goals, and incredible things can happen. I've seen incredible transformations off of someone who said, I don't think I'll be able to do anything anymore. My body's given up on me. I've seen incredible transformations. So start small, it can build.
Thank you so much, Alex, for joining me on today's podcast episode. You started off by discussing your diagnosis journey and how your life kind of changed after that. We talked about acceptance when you do live with this diagnosis, but also a period of denial. We talked about your challenges with fitness and how there's also a knowledge gap with ankylosing spondylitis. We just talked about your shoulder surgery, and then we talked about physical therapy, how that small side of seeing lots of physiotherapists change the way that you perceived fitness. And then we took a turn to talk specifically about fitness again, specifically how exercise and kind of mental health and mindset plays a role in changing your perspective. And to end off the episode, we talked about your personal training business and how you help people with ankylosing spondylitis achieve their health goals and fitness journeys. So everyone, like, comment, subscribe, check out Alex's social media channels, which I will link down below, and I'll see everyone in 2 weeks on Take a Pain Check. Thank you so much, Alex. Bye.
Thanks so much.
I can't hide, 'cause growing pains are keeping me